Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
It's a world at war that we know, that many countries are fighting each other. We know that Ukraine and Russia are fighting each other. We know that Israel is fighting with so many non-state actors or proxy actors in its neighborhood, Hamas to the south and Hezbollah to the north. There are lots of other chota, bada, small and big conflicts going on. In this picture, while we discuss all of this, we somehow overlook the one name that is central to many of these conflicts. And it's not just the conflicts in Middle East that you would expect, but also in some ways indirectly the conflict in Europe. And that country today is a very significant strategic element on the global chessboard. That country is Iran. Now, why is Iran so important? We know that both the proxies that Israel is fighting right now, whether it's Hamas in the south or Hezbollah in the north, both are Iranian proxies. Again, the group which has now held shipping through Red Sea to a ransom. In fact, they are forcing a lot of the world shipping to go around the old route, the pre-Suez Canal route of going around the Cape of Good Hope, including Indian shipping. By the way, that group, Houthis, also is a proxy of Iran. So Iran is able to fight all these wars through these proxies far away from its borders. Why did I say that Iran is also important vis-a-vis what's going on in Ukraine? Because it is Iran which is now selling to the Russians almost an endless supply of kamikaze drones, Shahed drones, and basically going back to the old Gisabita Stalin line that in a situation like this, quantity also has its own quality. So that's Iran is helping Russians have so many of these cheap drones that they can really blanket Ukraine's air defenses. Iran is doing that. Iran is also selling Russia a fair bit of artillery. Russia is firing a lot of artillery, almost 3.5 times as much as Ukraine is doing right now. And this is like all modern warfare, all modern ground warfare. It's an artillery warfare. So once again, Iran is vital there. And then there is also a new grouping, which is Russia, China. Essential to that is also Iran. Remember, Iran is a country heavily sanctioned by the Americans, but one country that doesn't care about these sanctions is China, which buys almost 75 to 90% of all of Iran's oil, which is exported. Now, apparently, it's exported at a discount to international prices. So, both sides benefit. Iran benefits because one deputy superpower imports from it, and the superpower cannot sanction the deputy superpower in a way that it might sanction other countries. India, for example, under a little bit of pressure after a couple of visits, sort of persuasive visits from America, stopped buying Iranian oil, although would have been very cheap for India. Transit costs also would have been lower, but India stopped buying. China keeps on buying. So this is a new grouping. If the new grouping, the larger new grouping, the bigger umbrella is China and Russia, then right under this, linked also is Iran. So that's a 3-nation grouping. All three are powerful nations. 2 are nuclear weapons superpowers. 1 is an aspirational nuclear weapons power. It is the new president of this Iran, that is Masoud Pezeshkian, who's now at the UN General Assembly. Every country is speaking at UN General Assembly, and there is focus on many of them. Prime Minister Modi has spoken, the Pakistani Prime Minister has spoken. All of these people will speak. Most of these leaders, when they go to the UN General Assembly, they basically address their own domestic audiences because they want their people to hear what they are saying. Masoud Pezeshkian, on the other hand, what he is doing at the UN General Assembly, he is speaking to the world. He's speaking to the world because Iran has concerns. Iran's main concern comes from the fact right now, the sense of urgency comes from the fact that all of Iran's proxies right now are under extreme pressure. Israel is at open war with two of them, that is Hamas and now Hezbollah. So there is a risk that both of these either will be greatly degraded, if not fully destroyed, or pushed back, from which it will take them time recovering. Houthis are a force that everybody is targeting. It's not just Israel. Israel does it as and when. But the Western powers are targeting them because they want those sea lanes freed up. And that's why combined naval patrols are being taken out. They have not been able to secure the sea lanes sufficiently for commercial shippers, for enough commercial shippers to think that it's safe to go that way. Insurance costs are high. So they are preferring to take the longer route. However, the Houthis have also come under pressure. What this means is that all of Iran's proxies are now under pressure. What does it do to Iran? Why did Iran create these proxies? Iran created these proxies simply because no country wants to fight for its defense, or no country wants to fight its battles on its own soil. Every country wants to fight its battles elsewhere. It isn't just America fighting in Korea or fighting in Vietnam. Every country, particularly any country with some notion of being a rising power. It can be a rising middle power, it can be a rising big power. Every country wants to fight its battles away from its shores. Iran has tried to do that. If Iran has seen Israel as the great enemy, then it must fight Israel away from its own territory. Now, it's not as if Iran is anywhere near being a neighbor of Israel. At the closest point, I think the distance between Israeli territory, which is very small, and the Iranian territory would be upwards of 1,000 kilometers. In fact, I would say almost 1,300 kilometers. It's a long, long distance. I know missiles can travel these distances. In 1991, that was more than 33 years ago. Saddam Hussein's missiles were taking off from Iraq, which is next door to Iran, and reaching Tel Aviv. Right? So missiles can cover those distances. But for any credible engagement on the ground, this is a long distance. What have the Iranians done? They've created these proxies. So the Israelis get busy fighting them closer to their borders. Hamas is in Israel's underbelly. Hezbollah is on Israel's head and at Israel's throat, quite literally. If you look at the map of Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and that region, it's a tri-junction that's very, very sensitive. It's like Israel's jugular. And Hezbollah is sitting there with more than 1,000 soldiers and nearly 2,000 rockets and missiles of various types, including about 400 short-range ballistic missiles. And Houthis mostly control Yemen, which is the southernmost part of the Arabian Peninsula. In Yemen, they've taken over Yemen. They have a state, although they don't govern the state officially, but they're a non-state actor as a state, as much as the Taliban were at various points of time. Now, what they are doing is they are creating some nuisance for Israel, particularly now, but essentially they've been threatening Iran's other adversaries. These other adversaries are Arab adversaries, Saudi Arabia and UAE, which are seen as allies of the US and thereby indirectly linked with Israel. Remember that UAE, Saudis haven't yet done it, but you know that UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, and some other Arab countries have been warming up to Israel. There was also the Abraham Accords, and it looked like it was a matter of time before the Saudis also join in. That is what must be prevented from Iran's point of view, and that's why Houthis have played a role there. The Saudis and UAE have got involved in fighting the Houthis. Americans have had to come to their help, as have America's allies, and now Houthis have got one more moral position, and that moral position is that we are the ones fighting the Israelis and Israel's allies. We will not let the shipping of any of Israel's friends pass through the Red Sea. That is the larger picture. Now, it is in that larger picture that Masoud Pezeshkian now has two worries. One worry is that Iran is suffering economically big time. Iran has some economic growth. I don't know where it comes from. I told you 80 to 90% of its oil is sold to the Chinese. So that's some income. There must be some other income with neighbors, etc. It's also selling this stuff to the Russians, the drones and the rest. But Really, for a country that size, 8 crore people with so much oil, it was a big power. It still can become a big power within months of the sanctions being listed. It is now sitting on a total GDP of just about $400 billion, which is about the same size today as, say, Bangladesh's, with not a drop of oil at this point of time. Israel wants the sanctions eased. For the sanctions to be eased, Americans have to re-engage, or Iran has to be able to re-engage the Americans through the good offices of the European powers, which are not so hostile to Iran, which would like to see some kind of a rapprochement and bring back JCPOA. That was the agreement that the previous Obama administration had signed with Iran, where America will gradually lift the sanctions in exchange for Iran giving commitments and also verifiable commitments on not weaponizing its nuclear capability. Now it looks like he's willing to resume that dialogue and put his nuclear capability on the negotiating table. That's one. And the second concern that he has is, and that is the more immediate concern, that if this fighting between Israel and Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north continues, and his proxies, Iran's proxies, continue to be degraded as rapidly as they are, what does he do? What happens to Iran's larger strategic plan of protecting its interests and its borders far away from its borders? Now, what does Iran do? The whole idea of having proxies is that they should fight far away from your territory in somebody else's territory and let them deal with it. If you are forced to go to war to protect your proxies, then the whole purpose of having them gets lost. Does Iran want to do that? Does Iran want to get drawn into a full conflict with Israel? First of all, it may not be militarily ready. Second, it's too distant. And third, the price it pays will be too high. So Iran is not inclined to get into that all-out war with Israel, although it looks like now that Israel is baiting the Iranians. I will quote from Pezeshkian's speech at the UN. He said, and I quote, "It is Israel that seeks to create this all-out conflict. They are dragging us to a point where we do not wish to go." Now, Iran has a problem, because even if Iran says, oh, we'll dump these proxies, after all, they are gun fodder, they are there to fight and die, right? They all want a shahadat, they want martyrdom. Let them have it, and they're fighting for a good cause, right? They're fighting Israel, and they're fighting for the cause of Palestinians, Muslims, Arabs, etc., etc. They can say all of that. But what happens is that these reverses, that these proxies are suffering, particularly Hamas and Hezbollah. Houthis are still far away. Hamas and Hezbollah, the reverses they are suffering is also indirectly a setback for Iran and a humiliation for Iran. These have also come on top of a series of other humiliations that Israel has heaped on Iran. Now, first of all, the most recent one, the series of pager blasts followed by walkie-talkie blasts, which have disabled so many Hezbollah fighters, also demolished their morale, because what do Hezbollah fighters do now, and their party officials? They can't talk on the phone. Because they couldn't talk on the phone, they shifted to pagers. Because they couldn't coordinate on pagers, they thought they will have meetings. Now, when they have meetings, the Israelis are going out and carrying out bombing attacks on their meetings, and that's how a lot of the key figures of Hezbollah have got killed. So each one of these setbacks for Iran is a humiliation. But this also comes on top of many direct humiliations. For example, the most recent one being the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the top leader of Hamas, who had gone to Iran to attend the swearing in or installation of the new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, after the elections. And he was killed when he was an honored guest of the Iranian government in a very secure compound in Tehran. Nobody's been caught for that. Before that, Israelis had been able to carry out many targeted attacks in Iran. For example, the most famous of them in November 2020, the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was like the chief scientist of the Iranian nuclear program, a highly protected man. And this was a very elaborate plot. We dedicated a full episode of Kartak Tatar to it. That's where they rigged an automatic rifle, a Belgian-made FN model, on an abandoned truck on a blind turn on a highway. As Fakhrizadeh's car turned to negotiate the turn, this automatic rifle went off and he was killed. This was quite a surgical assassination and a big humiliation for Iran. Even before that and after, many such have happened. In fact, in 2018, there was that famous, or depending on which side you are on, famous or infamous raid in which Iranian nuclear facilities had been raided at a mass level and tens of thousands of documents had been taken out by Israeli agents and taken to Israel. That was a big humiliation for Iran. These raids have been described in detail in media interviews by then Mossad chief Yossi Cohen. More recently, we saw just in April this year, senior Israeli officials, military officials, advisors from IRGC, they were sitting in the Israeli embassy compound, diplomatic premises in Damascus. They were bombed. Usually you respect the immunity of diplomatic compounds, but on April 15, Israel carried out a bombing on that compound which killed key Iranian officials, including a brigadier and a key figure, Brigadier Raza Zahidi. It is after that you will remember that the Iranians had fired those hundreds of rockets and missiles and drones at Israel, most of which were intercepted. That is where even the Saudis got involved. Saudis, Jordanians, they got involved in intercepting those. Only one or two reached Israel. So that was the one and probably so far the only example of Iran retaliating directly for all the humiliations that the Israelis are heaping on them. Now, it does look like that at this point, the Israelis are deliberately doing it. They want to draw Iran into some kind of a war, some kind of a direct conflict, because they think that tomorrow Iran may be too strong. Now, this is having multiple effects in Iran. First of all, Iran today is in a very interesting situation. Iran wants to warm up to the West. At the same time, Iran is enjoying and it wants to maintain its special relationship with Russia and China. At the same time, Iran wants to keep running these proxies and also ensure its preeminence in the Islamic world as the main Islamic national and ideological force fighting Israel and by implication also America. That's the reason when we say proxy wars go on in the world. And for Iran to be able to manage that complex game, which is a proxy war within a proxy war, because Iran and Israel are fighting a war where in the front are not the Iranians, in the front are Iran's proxies. Then as Iran fights Israel, it's also fighting indirectly Saudi Arabia and UAE. At the same time, it's also fighting the US, who it sees as Israel's principal backer. Now, within this complexity, while Pezeshkian may be looking for a new way out, just see what the Iranians are doing in the entire region. So, Iranians have built now groups or proxies which are Shias as well as Sunnis, and I will give you a count. Hamas, for example, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, very active in West Bank, also a little bit in Hamas, used to be active in Lebanon as well, southern Lebanon. So Hamas, PIG, both, these are Sunni groups, right? Iraq is a Shia ideological power, but both of these are Sunni groups. Houthis are a Sunni organization. Houthis are also called Ansar Allah. Then you have Alawites in Syria, then groups in Iraq. I will give you some details as we go along. Hezbollah, these are all Shias. So Iran is running both open wars through proxies and a secret war with its own people. Israel, therefore, is running an open war with Iran's proxies, all of these proxies, and a secret war with Iran, which is more one-sided because that's where Israel carries out attacks, surgical strikes, assassinations, and actions. Iran is not able to retaliate directly, barring that one flurry of missiles and rockets and drones that it sent out after April 15. In fact, Iran's concern and also Hezbollah's concern is now that Israel probably is drawing Hezbollah into an all-out war, because if that happens, it can lead to the destruction of Hezbollah, because however powerful Hezbollah might be, but like all asymmetric forces, it's fantastic when it comes to asymmetric warfare. Once it's drawn into a conventional warfare, then it will not be able to stand up to the Israelis. Never mind its 2000 odd missiles or its hundreds and hundreds of unmanned aerial systems or UASs. That's a general name for various kinds of drones. I'm sharing with you two graphics taken from Center for Strategic and International Studies. So thank you, CSIS, giving us a listing of Hezbollah's missiles and rockets. That's one. See the various categories. And second, giving a listing of Hezbollah's UASs. These are unmanned aerial systems, drones of various kinds, some so big that they can carry a 250 kg bomb or up to 4 anti-shipping cruise missiles. These are sizable. By the way, even the Houthis have a lot of these. In fact, if anything, Houthis have a lot more of these. They have ballistic missiles with much longer ranges as well. Now, what this is doing in Iran is, it's given the Iranians a dilemma. One is the soft liners in Iran who said, look, we've suffered from sanctions for too long. It's not worth it. So reopen dialogue with the Americans, particularly if Democrats come back to power. Trump, nobody knows what will happen. And then build your economy and meanwhile keep doing the stuff you're doing around Israel. But don't risk an all-out war. But there's also a bunch of hardliners in Iran who said, look, why have we built on this nuclear capability all this while? Why don't we just weaponize? Just move faster, weaponize. Once we have the nukes, all of the balance of power will shift and we'll then be able to negotiate with these guys at a very different level. Now, Iranians are a power. Iran is not a power that you can underestimate. If you look at the map of the Middle East, particularly this part of the Middle East, Iran, as I told you, is almost 1,000 to 1,300 kilometers away from Israel, from the closest point, depending on where you start calculating from. Now, between Iranian borders and up to Israel's borders, they've been able to establish some kind of a bridge. This is a bridge of proxies. So in Iraq now, they have a bunch of proxies, Shia proxies. They give them route into Syria. Syria is in any case an open space, and now Assad, who's Iran's ally, he controls more and more space in Syria. I will tell you about some of those routes in a couple of minutes. But through that, they come to Lebanon, and Lebanon, then there is open season, and Hezbollah controls that part of Lebanon anyway. If anything, Hezbollah has had almost 10,000 people located in Syria around Damascus fighting on behalf of Assad. Hezbollah is a force which is given legitimacy in Syria. In any case, in Lebanon, it has full legitimacy. It's a fully recognized political party with a large number of MPs and cabinet positions as well. So Iran is then able to maintain this bridge and get to Israel's borders. These are the forces that Iran has built, and these are mostly built out of IRGC, which is Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Q. Now, IRGC is an organization that was set up in 1979, just after the revolution succeeded, and it was set up under the direct watch of Imam Khomeini. He did set it up. His name in Iran would be Sipahe Pasdaran Inqilabe Islami. But they are called IRGC. They are IRGC for all of us, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It has many units. The strongest and the most powerful is the Quds unit. Quds is significant because Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem. And liberate Quds has been a war cry for a very long time. That's why it's called the Quds Force. The exact translation of Sipahe Pasdaran Inqilabe Islami is Guardians of the Revolution and Fighting Sons of Islam. Now, it has an army, navy, air force, and as I told you, IRGC QF, which is the IRGC Quds Force. It was the Quds Force chief, Qasim Soleimani, who the Americans assassinated on the outskirts of Baghdad in 2020. Now, the Quds Force is divided into many units. There is the Ramzan Corps, which is for Iraq, Levant Corps, which is for Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, Rasulullah Corps for the Arabian Peninsula, Ansar Corps for Afghanistan. That's important. I will tell you more about it. In fact, in Afghanistan, IRGC has been able to build quite a sizable group. It is called Fatimiyon Brigade, named after Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet. About 10 to 15,000 fighters from the Afghan group raised by IRGC have at various points of time been taken to Lebanon to fight alongside Hezbollah as well. In fact, if I read international literature, it would suggest that there is a few hundred people, at least, if not a couple of thousand, who are loyal to IRGC in Pakistan as well. Remember, if Iran exports almost 80 to 90% of its oil to China, where does the rest of its oil go? A lot of its oil goes into Pakistan by way of smuggling, and it has assets on both sides of the border along Pakistan as well. All of these forces, all of these proxies, these constitute what Iran calls its axis of resistance. And it is this axis of resistance right now which is under threat. And Iran is chafing because what happens? This is something that in a very different context, Om Prakash Chautala had told me. He had told me that the biggest pain for a politician when a politician is out of power is when the rival starts harassing your followers and you are not able to protect them. Apply the same test to this situation. These proxies are Iran's loyalists. Israel is now attacking them directly and devastating them. While this is happening, Iran is not able to intervene directly. And that's the reason Iranians are so worried and chafing and so concerned. Now, before I let you go, I will share with you one more graphic. These two articles from which we draw from CSIS. The lead author for both articles is Harold Brown, who's chair and director of the Transnational Threats Projects at Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. He's also the author of a much-quoted book, A Covert Action, Reagan, CIA, and the Cold War Struggle in Poland, and also Waging Insurgent Warfare. Both these papers. From one of these papers, I'm sharing with you this map. This map tells you of the three routes that Iran thought it will draw, three land bridges or three routes it thought it will build right up to the borders of Israel, even if the distance is more than 1,000 kilometers. The first route that goes sort of in the north, see the map, the route on the top. This is what Hezbollah calls Vilayat Imam Ali, which is the domain of Imam Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Holy Prophet, right? Then there is one central and third in the south. The common thing to these is, I'm not going into details, you can watch the map and you can watch the map and enlarge it, freeze it, enlarge it. But basically, each one takes you from Iran into Iraq, which is a wide Shia territory. Americans restored democracy in Iraq. What that means is democracy means the majority wins. The majority of Iraq is Shia. So Shias are in power in Iraq. Earlier under Saddam Hussein, while the Shias were the majority, the Sunni elites were in power. That has changed in Iran. And as a result of which, in Iran, many militias have come up. In fact, even when the Iran-Iraq war was raging in the 80s, Iranians found that while they had a bigger army, they were not so well trained, not so well armed. They were not able to stand up to the better trained, better organized Iraqi army. So they created asymmetric forces to fight the Iraqis deep inside. And one of those forces was something called the Badr Brigade. So Badr Brigade consisted of ideological Shias in Iran who were willing to fight at the command of Ayatollah Khomeini. That force itself lost more than 5,000 lives wearing the Iranian IRGC uniform. They died inside Iran. So many of those forces are intact. In fact, those forces are so powerful and everything is so mixed up in the Middle East that when mostly Sunni forces, in fact, almost entirely Sunni forces, occupied the towns of Mosul, Tikrit and others in northern Iraq, these were for ISIS. And in the fight against ISIS, the American forces were joined by Iranian forces, by Iraqi forces, and also by these Shiite militias loyal to IRGC and Iran. So these are very strong forces in Iraq. We've lately seen some instances of missiles being fired from Iraq into Israel. So these forces are there, and through these, the Iranians think they can create these routes that take them straight to Israel's borders through Iraq first, then Syria, and then Lebanon. So look at these three possible routes. In Iraq, they also have factories to make missiles. There's one at Jurf al-Saban, north of Karbala, Al-Zafrania, east of Baghdad. These are established places, and there are groups loyal to IRGC. I will not name all of them. If you want more details, you can read this paper from CSIS, War by Proxy. It has all the details, but basically the Shiite groups, the armed Shiite groups in Iraq are divided in three categories. The first set is fully loyal to IRGC and Ayatollah Khamenei. These are Badr organization, I mentioned this to you. Asaib Ahl al-Haq, Kataib Hezbollah, Kataib Sayyid al-Shohada, Harkat Hezbollah al-Nujaba. These are fully loyal to the Iranians, to IRGC and Ayatollah Khomeini. Then the second lot is loyal to Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani of Najab. His form of Shia Islam is the quietist Islam. That's a quietist school. He wants his people not getting mixed up with the Iranians, but staying loyal with the Iraqi government and joining its security forces. And third are Shiite forces loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr, who has gone this way or that. His father used to be a very pro-Shia ideological cleric. Muqtada al-Sadr, on the other hand, has talked about Arabism, and he's talked about put Arabism above the Shia loyalty to the Iranians. He's also someone who plays both sides. And remember, his strength comes from the Basra area, and it's in Basra in 2018 that the Iranian consulate was attacked and ransacked. So it's in that super complicated situation that Iran is operating. So far, Iran has managed this quite deftly. However, now with this almost all-out assault on Hezbollah and the pager blasts and the rest and the daily bombings, Netanyahu has upped the ante. He is inviting Hezbollah into a full-fledged conflict. So Hezbollah has to decide. Behind Hezbollah, Iran have to decide. They also have to decide, first of all, whether to let Hezbollah fight. And second, if the fight doesn't go so well, which likely it will not, does Iran join in directly or not? And if so, what is the downside? What are the risks? What are the likely benefits? That's the reason Masoud Pezeshkian has looked so busy in New York. It's also a rare opportunity that the Iranians get to go to the Western world and talk to all their Western interlocutors in same place, because this is the one place where sanctions don't matter.